In the early 1920s, the literary world witnessed a groundbreaking work that redefined how history was perceived and studied. Published in 1920, H.G. Wells's The Outline of History was the first of its kind, a book that attempted to narrate the comprehensive history of the entire planet rather than focusing on the isolated trajectories of single nations or civilizations. This ambitious endeavor was not merely a collection of facts but a visionary interpretation of humanity's shared journey. Wells, best known for his science fiction masterpieces like The Time Machine and The War of the Worlds, demonstrated in this work that his foresight extended beyond speculative fiction into the realms of history and geopolitics. Wells's approach in The Outline of History was revolutionary. At a time when most historical accounts were ethnocentric, often glorifying a single culture or nation while ignoring the interconnectedness of global civilizations, Wells took a radically different path. He painted history as a grand narrative of humanity's evolution, from prehistoric times to the dawn of the 20th century. This global perspective was unheard of in an era dominated by narrow, ethno-racial histories. One of the most striking aspects of the book is Wells's admiration for figures who embodied benevolence and moral vision over brute conquest and imperial ambition. Among these, his praise for Samrat Ashok of India stands out. Wells calls Ashok the king of kings and devotes considerable attention to his reign. Ashok's transformation from a ruthless conqueror to a devout follower of Buddhism, who prioritized the welfare of his subjects over personal power and glory, left a profound impression on Wells. He saw in Ashok an ideal leader, one who sacrificed the riches and grandeur of kingship to pursue the higher goals of peace and public welfare. In Wells's narrative, Ashok's reign exemplifies the triumph of compassion and moral clarity over the destructive impulses of conquest. In stark contrast, Wells's treatment of conquerors like Alexander the Great is notably measured. While he acknowledges Alexander's military genius and the vast empire he forged, Wells does not hesitate to critique the ephemeral nature of his conquests. For Wells, Alexander's legacy, marked by violence and domination, pales in comparison to Ashok's enduring influence, which promoted harmony and enlightenment. This contrast reflects Wells's belief that the true measure of a civilization lies not in its capacity for war but in its contributions to the collective well-being of humanity. Another remarkable aspect of The Outline of History is Wells's uncanny foresight regarding the future of nations like India and China. Writing in the 1920s, a time when both countries were mired in poverty and colonial subjugation, Wells predicted their eventual resurgence as global powers. At the time, such a prediction was nothing short of audacious. The world of the early 20th century was steeped in Eurocentrism, and the prevailing discourse often dismissed non-Western civilizations as stagnant or inferior. Against this backdrop, Wells's assertion that India and China would rise again to prominence demonstrated extraordinary vision. Wells's prediction was rooted in his understanding of the deep civilizational strengths of these nations. He recognized that India and China had been great centers of culture, science, and philosophy long before the rise of European dominance. Despite their temporary decline, he believed that their inherent resilience and cultural richness would enable them to recover and thrive in the long run. Today, as India and China rank among the top 3 economies in the world in terms of purchasing power parity, PPP, and are poised to become the top 2 in the coming decades, Wells's vision has been vindicated. His ability to foresee this transformation, at a time when both nations were devastated by famines and colonial exploitation, speaks of his insight. It is also worth noting that Wells's predictions stood in stark defiance of the racial prejudices and white supremacist ideologies that were pervasive during his time. The early 20th century was marked by the belief in the inherent superiority of Western civilization, a notion often used to justify imperialism and colonial rule. By highlighting the potential of India and China to reclaim their historical greatness, Wells challenged these biases and offered a more inclusive and equitable view of global history. While The Outline of History may not be as celebrated as Wells's science fiction works, it remains a seminal text for history and geopolitics enthusiasts. The book's expansive scope, coupled with Wells's insightful analysis and visionary predictions, make it a compelling read. It invites readers to reflect on the interconnectedness of human civilizations and the cyclical nature of history. More importantly, it underscores the enduring relevance of values like compassion, benevolence, and cultural resilience in shaping the destiny of nations. In revisiting the outline of history, one cannot help but marvel at Wells's ability to transcend the intellectual limitations of his era. His celebration of leaders like Ashok, his critique of imperial conquest, and his prescient understanding of global power dynamics all attest to his status as a thinker far ahead of his time. For those seeking to understand the broader currents of history and the forces that shape our world, H.G. Wells's magnum opus remains an invaluable guide.